The Private Label Pod with your host Paul Mooney, brought to you by Private Label People.
You just listen and leave the rest up to us.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Private Label Pod, episode 16. I am Paul Mooney. Today we sat down with Robert and he gave us some thoughts on innovation, how he's had to change his way of thinking over the years since he first started selling online. We hope you enjoy.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Innovation. Okay, so I'll ask you this. How has private label selling changed from whenever you first started out?
Well, in a phrase, very little has changed, right? It hasn't changed very much. There's certain elements that have, which we could certainly dig into, but I think to cover the ones that haven't changed are probably just as pertinent and as important as those other ones. And it's probably all the ones that people want to hear are the things that have changed. So we'll leave those to the end, which is good. But certainly, like private label selling, we're still using the same platform if we go, right back, as in Amazon's still the primary platform, if not more so. So like whenever I started off selling, Amazon had just come to town, right? So it was very, very new. There were other platforms there, but then Amazon has just really taken over in terms of the private label space. Sure, there are other platforms that you can and should sell on, the likes of eBay globally, Walmart in North America, some other country-dependent stores in certain countries that Amazon hasn't had the same level of consumer penetration. And your own website, certainly, like Shopify, things like this, can be something that you can do. But like 80 to 90% of your sales are going to come from Amazon, which is still true to this very day. I think also the way that you sell, in terms of listing the products, putting up your price, all of that kind of launch scenario, that's all exactly the same as well. So from the mechanics of it, everything's exactly the same. It's maybe more around I guess you would say, the little pieces of the puzzle that potentially have changed, Paul.
Whenever Amazon first came to town, as you say, did you see it being the success that it is, and people all around the world, certain countries not so, but getting parcels to their doorstep within 24 hours, this huge marketplace that it's become? Did you see it becoming the company that it is now to that extent? This isn't an advertisement for Amazon, by the way. But
in a word, no. And I think if anybody was to answer that any other way, I think they'd be talking through their arse.
What did they get wrong at the start? Did they get things wrong at any point, do you think? Or how have they innovated? How have they changed as a...
Well, we kind of got to go back and say, like, initially they were a bookstore. That's what they sold, even before their own platform really developed into being able for others to sell products. They went through being a bookstore and then moved into other goods, but they were doing all of the selling themselves, which they still do a fair bit of, Amazon retail. But of course, that percentage has been decreasing all the time, while still growing overall in dollar value. The percentage of their overall that they do has actually been declining, and it's the third parties that are increasing that percentage. So I think you could turn around and say, well, they got it wrong at the start by only selling books, but they're a very innovative company. And I think that Jeff Bezos he was probably the only one that saw just how big this could be and become. And even back then, he probably had those plans for, next day delivery, probably even that 1 hour delivery that's available in certain cities. And we've seen it over the last number of years, like drone delivery, and that's starting to come in. Yeah, they really take innovation to a whole new level. So I think anybody looking back and saying, oh yeah, I saw this happening, nah, you didn't. Like,
It would have been hard to foresee just what it's become.
I'd actually ask the same person if they were saying, yeah, I saw that. I would say, well, how many shares did you buy in the company back then? Because I didn't buy any. I didn't see it happening. And if you did see this happening, you would have been heavily involved in their shares.
Absolutely, yeah. You would want the winning lottery ticket numbers this week off them as well, yeah. But that's Amazon. Obviously, they're the big guys at the top. What does it mean for us little guys? How important is innovation to the likes of yourself?
I think it's vitally important. I think it all comes down to like the variables and the way that we start to discuss certain things. Because, like I said, the whole platform is very, very similar. Sure, there are some subtle differences, but really it comes down to the variables that we're talking about. I would have said 15 years ago, 10 years ago, people were talking about, like profit on investment, profit on return, which really, whenever you boil it down to it, is return on investment, the way the majority of people would say ROI. That's old hat now. Like that's a narrative, that's a variable that just doesn't make any sense anymore, because there's so many other things. Whenever you're talking about your profit on your return, or the amount of money that you get back after the sale, and you've paid for your COGS. So I'll go back to like a profit and loss report. You get your revenue top line, then you've got COGS second line. COGS are really made up from the product's cost itself, the cost of shipping it into the country, the cost of shipping it into Amazon, the cost of shipping it out of Amazon, and the cost that you pay for the referral fee on Amazon. That's your COGS. But that's now become outdated, right? And those variables are becoming outdated, because inside private label, you've got an expense which a lot of people bring into COGS, which is storage. And you want to then look at that, and you want to start thinking about that and saying, how can I eliminate this from my expenses? Right? Very innovative to eliminate a storage cost whenever you're a physical product business and you have to store, or at least you have to store somewhere before Amazon. I'm not talking about eliminating Amazon storage, but you've got to try and eliminate that, or at the very least get it solid so that you know exactly what it is that you're going to pay on that, and therefore can start creeping up into a COG. But that's where the paradox comes. It's not a COG. It is an expense. And that's where I've started looking at a thing called operational margin. Not operating margin, but operational margin. That is new. That is 2024 and beyond. All these other variables that talk about something on investment or something on return or ROI and things like that, that's old hat. It's consigned to the bin. Leave it where it belongs.
Operational margin sounds like a film that Tom Cruise will be in. But
well, I hope it is, because I should have royalties then to that, and I'll be rapping Tom's door, looking down at him and saying, "Tom, you owe me a few quid."
Yeah, well, you would only need to be 4'5" to look down at Tom, to be fair. So as
long as he's in that day and not off doing something else.
You were talking about this new terminology that you have. Is that just a mashup of all the previous things like ROI? Is that building all those together?
No, it's actually almost the complete opposite. So it's sort of like stripping it back. So instead of, I kind of always use the terminology of like looking at a Windows PC versus a Mac, right? So a Windows PC will come out with a patch, and they'll put a patch over something that's not working, and hence it runs slower. Whereas Mac they'll go back to the drawing board and they'll create something new, and a Mac runs a hell of a lot quicker, right? Most of the time. So I look at that and say, instead of putting a patch on something and before you know it, you've got a patchwork quilt, strip it back, re-look at it, and then start putting it back together again the correct way. So whenever we're looking at a profit and loss account, which every single person should do, it should be the northern star of their business. And we covered this at a live event where we went through that example of a northern star, like a guiding star. That's the profit and loss account. And then you should be bringing these variables, this narrative in, and you can then see it a hell of a lot clearer. You can plan a lot better. And whenever you're using terminology like operational margin, you now get to see, basically all of the lights start turning on inside this profit and loss statement or profit and loss account. and it allows people to make decisions. And then those decisions are obviously to do with either lowering expenses or increasing revenue. And that is the only two ways to increase your net profit at the very bottom. So it becomes nice and simple, Paul.
Absolutely. And innovation is it's a hugely important thing in business. I remember years ago you talking to me about the importance of working on the business instead of working in the business. And imagine if you're running an Amazon label, a private label company, that you work a lot on the likes of research. You work a lot on your finances and your cash flow and all of these things. How can you innovate in terms of growing your portfolio? Is that a matter of using the support that private label people give in terms of seeing what we recommend and what we do? Is that something that is difficult to innovate when you're right in a business like that? Because most private label sellers, what I'm trying to say is, are on their own. They don't have a huge support network. They don't have a lot of staff around them, but that's where they can come to us and we can help them with keeping up to date with the current innovative things that are out there.
Yeah, I think that word you use, network, and I know a lot of people listening will say, well, of course you're going to say that. Who doesn't recommend, a company that they're involved in? So, it's always good to kind of take a step back and give alternatives. So if you're working on research, well, you could argue that is working on the business, because you only do research really one time. And then if that product is successful in terms of making it through your research process, you never have to research it again. But you will have to reorder it. You'll have to do the numbers behind it over and over and over again. So there's an element there which is working on the business, and there's an element of it that's working in the business or inside the business. And certainly having a network of trusted partners, of consultants that are not employees, like you're not employing them regardless. You're not sending a paycheck regardless. You're paying on performance whenever you're talking about consultants. That's becoming absolutely massive. And even if you look at, say, the gig economy, where people are starting to use the likes of Upwork, where you don't go and hire a software developer as an employee. You get him or her in as a project. So it's like, here's this project I want you to work on. What is your price? I will pay you for that. Then whenever that is done, that's it. And this becomes a lot more cost effective for businesses. And you don't have employees sitting around kind of doing work because they're employed. It's the other way. They're employed because they're doing work. So that's a little bit of innovative thinking. And the same should kind of apply then in terms of consulting. Could be research. Maybe you're not good at research. Maybe you don't like it. And maybe you want to outsource that. That's certainly something that private label people offer. The likes of reporting and things like that, which I've just been talking about. Again, another part of that service. So, of course, I'm going to recommend it. But even if you're not using ourselves, using some form of consultancy or some form of outsourced network would be very pertinent, Paul.
Absolutely. And we talk about innovative technology. I suppose one of the most innovative companies in the world is owned by Mr. Elon Musk. And we were down at your house at the weekend, which it's quite remote. And I remember you having a Wi-Fi issue in terms of trying to get something put in there. And to go down the average Wi-Fi route that we would have went through before, it would have been very, very costly. And even then, I don't think the signal would have been great. But you have Mr. Musk's Starlink sitting on the roof of your house, and it works fantastically well for you. But when it comes to innovation, he's the forefront of that. What he's done with that is almost it's unthinkable. Some of the stuff that he's done, and
it's absolutely crazy. I mean, you look at, again, going back a number of years where you would have had satellite internet. Like it was chronic. Like it was absolutely dreadful. And it was only for that type of thing. It was remote, so therefore you accepted what you got because that's all there was. But now with that, getting 200 meg, 300 meg, it's better than a line in many cases, and available regardless of inverted commas, how close to the road you are or how close to the network. So definitely very innovative. And I think as well the connection there is him and Jeff Bezos of Amazon are both like, they're taking innovation to a crazy level. Like they're both moon men, space explorers. That's how far it's got to, with Jeff's Blue Moon and Elon Musk's SpaceX. It's on to a completely different stratosphere.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's like that innovation that Amazon and the likes of Tesla, etc., have shown. Other companies have fallen way, way behind because they just haven't been able to innovate at the same levels. I mean, you mentioned eBay earlier. Don't want to get sued by them, but they've sort of been left in the wake of Amazon, and it's not a platform that you really want to use now when you have the option of using Amazon. Speaking about myself personally, I would rather use Amazon than use eBay.
Yeah, I think they got a lot of things. You were asking me what Amazon got wrong. I think eBay and a lot of these other platforms got things wrong as well. They tried to be all things to all people, and their systems were very open, and they were open for abuse by sellers. And you'll see a lot of sellers complaining about Amazon, right? And realistically speaking, they're complaining because the system is closed. It's a tight-knit system. And I'm not saying that Amazon seller support is the best thing since sliced bread, but what I am saying is whenever I first went on to Amazon system, I hated it. Like I really hated it because it didn't have the open-endedness of eBay, right? So, your images had to be a certain format and they had to be in a certain way. eBay let you do whatever you want. What that created was just a mess whenever you looked in as a consumer going to buy something. You didn't really know where to look. Amazon, completely different ballgame. Then inside the listing itself, Amazon, so rigid. Do this, character counts, bullet points, character counts, only allowed certain HTML inside the description back then, before A+ brand content. eBay, do what you want. Like you could have coding inside there, you could have shops, right? So it was so open, but humans being humans, they abused it. And Amazon stuck to their guns, and all of a sudden I saw my sales moving from 90% eBay, 5% Amazon, 5% other, or something along those lines. What I'm saying is heavily weighted in eBay's favour and very low sales on Amazon, and they just started creeping. It went 5%, 6%, 7%, and the sales themselves were rising as well, and then one day it just overtook it, and it never looked back. Like it was a one-way street. And like that's going back a considerable amount of years. And I don't have the stats to hand, but I know, like, go look at the revenue that Amazon does versus eBay. Amazon's the place to be. And private label on Amazon is the place to be, because that's the real business. So if people are talking about innovating, don't go too far. We don't always need to create another shiny object. Stick with what we know, stick with what we know best. And for me, that's private label on Amazon, Paul.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question, or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Thank you to Robert there for giving us his thoughts on all things innovation. He's obviously got a wealth of experience, and it's great that we were able to listen to that. So thank you once again, and we hope you can leave us some comments underneath on what you would like to hear us talk about next time.